Good morning. This is Charter Moms Chats. My name is Inga Cotton. I'm the founder and executive director of San Antonio Charter Moms. And yesterday was Father's Day. And in our Charter of Summer of Learning Summer Experiences Guide, we had a very special guest post from Gary W. Boyd. Dr. Boyd is a expert storyteller. He raised his two sons on lots of stories. So, and it's hard to summarize his many accomplishments. He's a teacher, he's a businessman and consultant. He's a proud dad with his wife, Maureen, and he's published a lot of stuff. We've got links in the blog post. In the description, there's a link to the blog post. And so it's about storytelling that dads can do with their kids. And it's just full of ideas, things for different age groups and stuff. So I'm really grateful that we have Gary on Charter Moms Chats this morning to talk about the post and kind of add, that richness and like the real life experiences and advice for parents about how to get started if you feel a little intimidated about establishing a new tradition like this. So I've got some questions lined up for Gary, and he is ready to go. So one thing that I wanted to ask you was, okay, a lot of the recommendations are things about how to build good habits, right? Because real learning doesn't just happen one time. It happens when you make a tradition of something, right? And the bonds that form. It's when you do something, it's when you keep revisiting something. So tell us, like, why is it important to build habits, and when you get something good going, to keep revisiting that?
Well, thank you, Inga. Glad to be here, and welcome, Charter Moms. It is extremely important, and you mentioned in our correspondence a strategy there, and it is a strategy, and it's important to build those traditions and those strategies, because things change, and they change so rapidly. Children grow and develop. If you don't believe me, just look at their shoes that you bought them 3 months ago. Kids develop on the inside and the out. Plus, cultural norms morph. My mom could say, Gary, you kids be home by dark. You go out and play, be home by dark. Well, that may not be appropriate now. Plus, there is constant value application. When you're learning and building those habits, you have the opportunity to apply over and over and over again. And then there's continuous technology development. All the time, things are morphing. The very fact that we're on this particular format tells us a lot about it. Kids know more about Zoom than we do, I promise you.
That's true. Yeah, my daughter was, she showed me how to do the Zoom backgrounds thing. And then also she came up with something that I had never seen before. So like there's a whiteboard feature in Zoom. Right. And so like she and her friends remotely could like interactively like play a game on the whiteboard or like make a drawing together on the whiteboard. And I was like, I had no idea that was a function. And it's really something that was set up as a business tool. But the kids have figured out how to do something completely different with it. So
one thing I would add to that is to develop these sort of traditions, to get those firmly ensconced inside of us, no matter where we go as we grow up, anywhere in the world, those memories, those traditions are with us. And what I've noted is, as I travel, people go back to those traditions, and they're very meaningful points along the line. So it's extremely important, I think, to develop these.
Yeah, one thing that you put right in the front of the blog post is about how like storytelling is a way to transmit culture. It's something that goes back to the dawn of human history, and that it's a way that we share our values with our children, and we share our culture with them. And like it struck me that I thought, well, what a great starting point. Like how important storytelling is for this. It gives a sense of like why this project is so important. Why fathers and their children really should take the time to sit down together.
Well, I learned this a long time ago, way before I started doing any of the graduate work, but I came up with 7 things that storytelling does. It expresses, and we'll kind of go through some of these if you want to, but it expresses, educates, equips, edifies, it entertains, it elucidates, and finally it exposes. And all of these things came as a result of us working with our own children. But it expresses things. It allows us as parents to express in a way that's unique to us and unique to them. It educates them. It allows us to go forward with an education about our heritage, our history, our culture. It equips our children with very important facts. This river turns here this time of year. It goes there this time of year. Our community, our society. it edifies us. It bumps these formative thoughts against what we can convey in storytelling. And it does a great job of building confidence. It entertains, very, very important in my opinion. Education should not be without entertainment. This edutainment, as it's so called nowadays, extremely important. It elucidates on, this might be the most important thing. It takes our history and our culture, our principles, the values that we hold dear, and it allows our children to see God values, human values, social values, stewardship values. What do we do with what we have? And it exposes us in a way to life skills. So all of these things come from storytelling. You know, if you reverse engineer leadership, which I teach a lot on leadership, and you look at it and you start breaking that down and backing it away step by step, what you find is that an important stanchion in leadership is communication. And if you look at communication, it's no longer some soft skill. Studies from CEOs around the world, LinkedIn, McKinsey, so many others have done studies that say communication has gone from being 10 or 11 on the list to number 1. And it makes sense. I don't care how good you are at technology, what your software development is. If you can't communicate, no one's going to buy into what you're doing. Where does that start? It starts in childhood. It starts preschool. It starts middle school. It starts high school. It's there in college. And so these components of communication, they're embedded within storytelling. Right. It's fantastic. Right. It's just a wonderful way to try to convey everything that we value to our children.
Yeah, you're making such a strong case, and you do in the post about why storytelling is so important. And then what you do is in the post, like you make it these very easy on-ramps for families. Like you suggest projects that they can do with very simple materials and how to get started. So I wonder if you could, I don't know, we may not have time to go through all of them because there's so many, but I'm thinking there's there's the storybook project, there's the Playdough Garden, there's the story vault, like for the bigger kids. So I don't know, do you want to pick one of those projects and kind of, talk about how you give parents an on-ramp for that, and and how you kind of establish the project, but then let kids have their input on it, let them have say in structuring it?
Right. In fact, if you don't mind, let me interweave something that we did as children with preschool. Yes. Every child is so different. They learn differently, they express differently. And if you have more than one child, you know that. And we had 2 boys, Justin and Dylan, Justin being the older. When Justin hit the earth, you could sit him down and instruct him directly. And it wouldn't matter. If you said, sit there and listen, he would sit there and listen. The younger one comes along 3 years later, and he wants to crawl all over the walls, in the tree, on the house, and he learns more indirectly. So I traveled a lot back then, and I started a series called Buford and Felix, The Adventures of Buford and Felix. And so I started storytelling, making them up. It just so happened that Buford, I chose 2 names that were not associated with their friends. And Buford was exactly the same age as our older Justin. Felix was exactly the same age as our younger, and they grew as our boys grew. And I would start out, once upon a time, Buford and Felix, and I would start with the story. It didn't take 3 or 4 days to where we couldn't go to bed unless I told them a story. When I would travel and I'd come back in the door, they would say, Dad, how was your trip? Did you bring us a surprise? And then the third thing is, can we have a story tonight? What about Buford and Felix? It allowed me to take values or lessons or facts or history or culture, all those things we mentioned, and embed them with a single topic in each one of those little stories. And we did this for years. Well, what I learned is, for instance, Justin, who would learn directly, he got it. He absorbed it. But the little one, what I noticed is, if it was not directly toward Dylan, but in a story, he picked all of it up, all the nuances. And when I would begin a story, they were captured. Their eyes were big. They would ask questions. It was as though it's real. So when we start with preschoolers, start with things that fire the imagination. There's a study out now, Penn State, Dr. Beatty and his cohort, Dr. Muscatel from Chapel. They've done a study on what parts of the brain fire up when imagination is used. And it used to be the thinking that it was a certain set of right brain activities, but no, what they've done now with the new technology is when you use your imagination, it literally connects all of the major regions of the brain. It fires them up. That's one reason I say, don't go to technology first if you can avoid it. Keep technology at bay. It'll come, and it'll come naturally. But fire up the imagination. I promise you, your grandmother and grandfather, your grandfather played with a little wooden peg that he imagined was a truck and played in the dirt outside his house. So preschoolers, start with those stories. Just make them up. They don't care. It doesn't matter how good or bad. They're all good to them. And then as you progress, make it age appropriate. You know, I learned a long time ago that I did a little ABC thing, and this is 40 years ago, that A, if it's age appropriate, B, if it's bite-sized bits, C, and if it's creatively conveyed, you can teach children anything, rocket science, history. A really good example, I had a chance to work with a child not long ago. There's a great site called brainfacts.org. They have a 3D model of the human brain. And if you bring that model up, you can turn it, twist it, click on it. It gives you the part. It's beautiful. And the description. You can take a child that's 4 years old and they're fascinated by it. You can take a high schooler and go into the same thing. So starting these traditions starts in preschool, in my opinion, and they go forward. High schoolers are maybe more of a challenge. They're so busy and they think they know it all already. And technology's out there. You won't hold them at bay on technology very often, but start the family story vault. Let them help you develop it. You guide it, orchestrate it, but let them develop it. And
I thought in your section about the family story vault, which is the sort of high school age teen activity, there were some things I thought were very helpful. Like you kind of script out the approach, right? Of like if a teacher, if they feel busy, if they feel like embarrassed about it, or if they feel reluctant somehow, like, you talk about, and you're modeling a way of treating them with respect, right? Yes. Respecting their time. Yeah. And also like how with the technology, like you relate, and like you use like the moth story hour as an example, right? So that they have kind of a model of, and it's part of it's like building their confidence and their independence. And then also the mind mapping tool, right? So you link like a whole bunch of, different software programs, and it like, it's thinking like, this is real thinking about how to structure thoughts, how to organize. And, these are really great skills that like everybody needs to be a good communicator, which, as you said, is a really important part of leadership.
It absolutely is. And you're right. Mind mapping is just a term. I think Tony Buzan was the one that first came up with it, but there's so many programs out there now. But if you simply took a piece of paper and you put a circle in the middle and you said, that's our topic, then you draw a line to another circle and morph that out into a nucleus with the surrounding satellite circles. That's all it is. Software can help you do that quickly. Is it brainstorming? Yes, but it's brainstorming plus, because what it allows is the expression of anything that may be related to begin with without judgment. Let your high schoolers, for instance, throw it out there. Don't judge them about it. I've learned that adults hardly know what brainstorming really is. And someone will throw out an idea and someone will immediately shoot it down. Oh, we don't have budget for that. Oh, that won't. We tried that 2 years ago. No, let your kids throw it out there. High schoolers want respect, and they are learned from us as parents as we guide them. So let them help shape that with the mind mapping and with the brainstorming. You don't have to call it that, but they're going to find the tools. As you start doing it manually, what the high schoolers will do is say, oh, mindmap.com, and I'll pop it.
There's a better way.
Yeah. So it's exciting to see how technology is morphing with our ability to do storytelling and fire the imagination as it's applied across the board. So it's really fun.
Right. And you've got, as far as, I think one of like a concern I hear from a lot of parents is that, like, as our kids did remote education, right, because the campuses were closed. And then, as we have our kids at home, like, like parents do worry about their kids just having too much screen time and also being kind of too passive not taking ownership or not engaging with what they're seeing. They're just taking stuff in. And the activities that you have, like you talk about, like actually like making a book out of, right, with some of the ideas, right? Or like the Play-Doh idea, how
Oh
like,
my gosh.
and then they get outside.
I've done the Play-Doh thing with children, with adults, with leadership classes. But with children, you can take the Play-Doh, you can order a set from Amazon, it's cheap, and you get all these colors and let them make the little squares and then go out in the yard, pick little stems and leaves from everything you can find around and let them embed them inside and make their own little Play-Doh garden. And then ask them questions. It's a great lesson, for instance, and very timely, as we face diversity issues, racial issues. What you'll do, the children will expose their own minds. You can say, I love your Play-Doh garden. Tell me about it. Who owns this garden? Who should lead this garden? Is that a man, or is that a child, or is that an alien? And let them talk. And what you will see is that their imagination begins to fire, but also their pre-biases, their opinions, that they're growing. Well, I think he should do it because he's purple and he's bigger than the rest. They'll tell you what they believe about diversity with a simple little thing like a Play-Doh garden. Mm-hmm. And it won't cost you but $7 to do it, and you can use them over and over. Right. I've done the same thing with adults. So it can go all the way through. Use the Play-Doh thing and say, we're looking at a complex problem, for instance. Again, reverse engineer it. When we in life face complex problem solving, if it's simple, linear, you can do it by yourself or with a couple of other people just like you. But if it's a complex problem, stories after surveys after studies have shown that diversity helps. If you have, one of my doctoral classes, it was fantastic. We sat in a room one night. We had two doctoral classes combined. Dr. Norman St. Clair at UIW was leading. We were in a circle, and I was the only student in there, white, male, from the United States. The rest of the students were from all over the world, China, Japan, Russia, name it, all over the world. And we would bring up a topic in our doctoral studies, and the different perspectives were immense. I started doing something that will illustrate this. As I teach classes sometimes, I'll start with the breakfast thing. I'll say, take this little index card and think back. What's your favorite breakfast growing up? And I make them smell it, taste it, think about it. Give me one line on what your breakfast was. You would be amazed at college level kids that will say, sure, a boy from Texas, oh, bacon and eggs, it was great. But no, what if you're from Taiwan? What about the rice and the fish soup that you had for breakfast? Are these better? Are they different? And you can teach children about ethnocentrism. In other words, why is my world not the best in the world? Why can your world be important? All of that can happen with this diversity look. And it can happen with the most simple little games. And it leads us one into another. And they'll learn by doing, they'll learn by watching, and they'll learn by these games. Game theory is extremely important in raising children, no doubt.
Yeah. Let's revisit the question about technology. So you said like when you're working with teenagers, okay, so like with young children, definitely start without the technology, right? Start with like face-to-face things, right? Like the Buford and Felix stories, right? And then things like the storybook and the Play-Doh garden, right? Like you're working with pencil and paper, or you're working with the Play-Doh and the twigs and the leaves and things in the backyard. How about for adding technology, right? You said that, like, teenagers, they will find their own tools, right? If they're trying to problem solve. But I guess like for younger or middle grade children, like what are your suggestions about finding the right balance?
Well, the same thing there. You can take the technology and just place it at a different level with the middle schoolers. For instance, we can say, we're going to start our storybook for you to the middle schoolers, one each year that we'll develop. Let's begin this story tradition in our family. Now, how do we capture that? If we did it in just a regular book, it could be destroyed. So what do you think about putting it in the cloud? And if they don't already know about the cloud, I would be surprised. But then you can simply say it's a storage place and you can lead them right into that. And then if you use Evernote or whatever tool you want to, what I've learned is go ahead and introduce that. The kids will get it. the kids will get it in a hurry. I sat at a restaurant the other day, and the child had a cell phone that his mother had obviously given him for games, and she's having trouble with hers. This child is probably 8, and he said, "Mom, let me fix that." Grabbed her phone, fixed it, gave it back to her. They have grown up with technology. They're natives to it. And so what I've learned is go ahead and introduce whatever program you think you want to use, and then say, here's how we would search for that in Google, for instance. Let them do it. Guide them. Put your guidelines, proscribe what they're doing, but let them, because their minds will run. And the most important thing is not what I have found and forced upon you, but what we found together, what they've discovered. And they'll say, Mom, I think this works best. Let's use this. So create my storybook. And by the way, there's software that will do a flip book. So you can create your storybook, put your little written bubbles in there, and do audio, and you can save that year by year in the cloud. And so when you're 16, you can look back at the storybook that you started when you were 6. It's pretty important.
Yeah.
It's a different way of journaling. It's multimedia type journaling as you go forward.
Right. And one of the things you link to in the post is actually a PowerPoint, right? So, and I thought, wow, what a great tool. So tell us more about the PowerPoint and like how a family would use that and like, what you created it to do. So, and the readers, there's a link to it in the post. So just
I created that little PowerPoint for you and your audience because it's that simple. You take pictures and you use PowerPoint. Use it for as a method for learning and growing there. And take little pictures. And in the PowerPoint, you'll see, if you see that slide, it's about taking a single seed of corn. And as you noted, in South Texas, we can still grow corn very, very late in the year. And I'll never forget when I learned growing up on a farm and ranch that a single little seed would grow that plant with all those ears, and each one of those ears have seeds. There's something about that changes us when we use the soil and the water and the air. Well, use that. And what I did in the slide is just take PowerPoint and build a little story that not me telling them, not me a presentation, but them presenting to me and say, Dad, we want to tell you a story. First, we started with one seed, and just you can walk through the slide. So take a tool like PowerPoint. They will get it. They'll say, well, Mom, put this picture in there. Well, how can we find this picture? Well, remember the picture we took last Father's Day. Let's put it in there. And they will pick it up so quickly. They pick it up naturally and quickly.
Yeah. I think there's so many, I feel like I'm full of ideas and appreciation about like what's great about these prompts. And so like I said, sort of a concern that parents have is of kids being sort of consumers of electronic stuff, but not creators and not being analytical about it. And I think what's so important is that like these activities are things that families do together, so that like while you're working on these together, you're imparting values, right? So if you're going on Google to do a search, you can also talk about like being a smart media consumer, right? Like which sites are reliable and which sites are not, and that's part of skills. And you can talk about like privacy, right? Like when you create something, you want to put it behind a password so you can share it with family members, but maybe it's not open to the public, or and that I think one thing that sometimes families encountered while their kids were doing distance learning was that maybe like there were some things that they were used to using online, but maybe like for my kids, like they needed to learn to touch type so that they could create stuff more quickly. Or there's things about right, like you mentioned using PowerPoint or like using software to create like multimedia storybooks, and it's not that it's so strange to them because they are using digital stuff all the time, but but it's a little different process when you're trying to create something like a whole project, and you're trying to get your idea from your mind like into this product that then you can share with somebody, right? And that it's that and that's where those tools like the mind mapping and kind of outlining things, right, that's where the creativity comes in. I think that's what's so like you said, you can start with preschoolers, but it works for any age. It does. And it builds these bigger skills.
Inga, one of the things I would just highlight is this: good communication, and my master's is in communication and I love it, is the best way I can communicate is to take what's in my head, my ideas, my thoughts, and convey them to you. And if I can get you, my idea across to you, then I've succeeded, regardless of the interference between us or the context or the setting. And how best do I do that? So the way I approach it with children is, that's the reason I like to start orally. Watch their face, watch their eyes, listen to what they're saying. They light up. And as you're doing that, scribble a little bubble on a piece of paper. That's okay. But then the way to introduce technology, and here's my point, is a tool, not a whole world. You don't want them living on screen, but you want to use technology as nothing more nor less than a tool. How then can we best talk to grandma? We can't see her. She's 500 miles away. It's Mother's Day. What do? We could call her, but we can't see her. There is a new technology. It's called Zoom or many of the others. And let's use that. We'll share with grandma how she can set it up, and then we'll click and we test it. I'm telling you, that way kids say, technology, it's a tool. It's not the whole world. It's not everything. And to me, that's the key, because the tendency is to spend 10 hours a day, FaceTime, screen time, and that's not what we want. We simply want them to live in the real world with real life skills and use technology as tools.
Mm-hmm. We got a comment. Do you know this Boyd?
I do. Yes, hi, Athlete. Yes, that's my stepmom, and she should know. She lives next door to a school. Her son is principal in LaPorte. Her daughter has just retired from teaching, so school's been her whole world, her whole life. But extremely important that we allow. I'll put it this way. I ran across a man the other day that said, to heck with all the technology, get children away from it. Well, that's one view, but my opinion is, number one, that's not real. That isn't going to happen. And he doesn't do it. This guy's a farmer. He uses GPS to straighten his rows on his farm. He uses satellite with his tractor. And yet he's saying, keep our kids away from technology. No, that's not it. You can't put your head in the sand. What we need to do is simply say, technology we can invent, and it's morphing and it's changing our world. Now, how do we use it? How do we balance? How do we put this into perspective? That's the key.
Yeah, I've talked to my kids about like how do they feel if they've spent 20 minutes just watching YouTube versus how do they feel if they spent 20 minutes like on an interactive program, like sharpening their language skills or something, right? Or or writing a letter or writing a story, and like they're like, oh, I do feel different. Like if you created something, then you feel proud about it, right? And you feel like you have something you want to share and you want to talk to people about, and that's what keeps people connected.
Right, and you bring up a good point there too that I would like to put in the crease there. It's not just the experience that is the teacher; it sets the stage. It's not until we reflect on that where the real learning occurs. And so how do we do that with children? Let them express. Let's talk about it. It's not just doing it or using the technology. It's what did we feel? What did we think? What was going on there? What does that mean? How can we apply that? Well, when we do it next time, what does that mean? And when we get up tomorrow morning, how does that apply? In other words, that reflection, that's where the learning drips through. It soaks through. And it, like a giant rain over the top of a giant cavern, it drips through and forms all those stalactites and stalagmites. That's how that learning occurs, but only in reflection and that soak time. Just the experience by itself, it just gives us an experience. And I hear adults say that all the time. Experience is the best teacher. No, it's not. It's experience plus reflection. That's where the learning occurs.
Yeah. That's where you take important things away from it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Gary, we're almost at time, but do you have any closing thoughts? I read readers, like really, please, like click through, read the post and start doing some of these things in your real life, because I think it's tremendous how it will impact our kids for the long run, and it'll help us build bonds with them. So, but do you have any kind of closing thoughts?
It's been a delight to be here, and I wish we had hours and hours, and I love to share this. But what I've learned in teaching adults and teaching children is that literally, I'll repeat, you can teach children anything It doesn't matter if it is rocket science or medicine. At the earliest stages, simply break it down. Remember those simple ABCs, make it age appropriate and make it a bite-sized chunk that they can say, oh, I get that. And then convey it in such a way that's quite creative. We don't have to be boring. Well, tell stories. Our family gathered at Father's Day. Last night, we watched a story on Netflix called Deep Night, I think the title of it was, but it was storytelling inside of it. Oh my gosh. And we were all just sitting there as they were telling the story, and grown adults. It starts with those seeds that we plant in our children. They come up, as the twig is bent, so the tree grows, is the old adage. It's very true. So I just highly encourage, one of the delights that I'm involved in now is trying to take leadership and break it down and to say, if this is important, if you're going to be the CEO at your age here, then what are those core skills, life skills, communication skills? Well, where do they come from? Well, they don't just happen. Start them in preschool and grow them just like that corn seed, just like that garden that you're planting. So I highly encourage your readers and your participants and your subscribers, get involved in storytelling. You'll be amazed at how it fires the imagination.
Yeah, and it's a great thing to do with your family, and it will improve your communication and your leadership in your work as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, Gary, it's been wonderful having you as a guest, and I'm so proud to have your post as part of Charter Summer of Learning on our website. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate it so much.
Okay, good. Well, let's keep in touch. Thank you.
Absolutely. You do good work. Continue.
I appreciate it. Okay, bye.
Bye.